Hello and welcome to Worlds Apart. We may live in a global village, but every corner of this village is guided by different rules on what one may or may not say in public. One man's truth teller has long become another man's bigot, while public debate often comes down to venting outrage or hurling insults rather than discussing policies. Is it still possible to have a substantive conversation with those who disagree with you vehemently? Well, to discuss that, I'm now joined by Katie Hopkins, British journalist and media personality. Katie, it's good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for seeing me.
Now, you're a pretty controversial person in your own country. Many people consider you purposefully offensive, and yet over the past few days that you've been here in Russia, in St. Petersburg, you've only said nice things about this country, which honestly is not very used to hearing nice things about itself. Are you being purposefully spiteful? Are you saying all those things as a contrarian?
People have been surprised by my reporting from St. Petersburg because I love this place. I love the openness of it, and it's been a real surprise to me. We are, I think, in the West, in my personal view, you know, Putin is painted as a monster, and this is very much the monster's lair. And people are almost fearful, actually, of coming to Russia because there's this idea that it's somehow a frightening place. And all I've been trying to present to people and show people, I think, is only ever what I see or my truths. And my truths from this place is that I love it. I feel very safe here, much safer than in London, for example. And I also find people here to be really Russian first, so they identify as Russian to me, and that's a real difference from the country that I come from.
Let me pick up on that point, because you had one tweet specifically about St. Petersburg that seemed to rile a lot of people. You described the city as a place untouched by the myth of multiculturalism and deranged diversity, and I'm sure you've seen all those dozens of replies of people pointing out to you that this is the most multicultural city in the whole of Russia.
I hear all that, and of course the 160 nationalities and built by Italians and the French and the buildings and the Dutch name and whatever.
And we also have a very vibrant Muslim community who petitioned the Tsar for the first mosque.
5,000 people. Yeah, no, I've heard it all, I've seen it. I get what people are saying, I get them. But when you come to St. Petersburg as an outsider, and I'm an outsider, it feels Russian. People, if you speak to people in the street, or with help when I speak to people in the street, they identify as Russian first. You go to the UK, you won't find any of that.
Russian may mean an ethnic affiliation, or it may mean a national affiliation. So most of the different nationalities whom we love to have in this city would also identify as Russian. I wonder if you, given that you like it so much, maybe multiculturalism is not such a bad thing after all.
No, because I don't buy your definition of multiculturalism at all. And just because you have one mosque with 5,000 people able to fit into it, that does not in any way replicate the Europe that I know. I've just come from Belgium, Molenbeek, in fact, the jihadi capital of Europe, where they have 22 mosques in a 6-kilometre square. Do you have miles or kilometres here?
Kilometres.
Yeah, 6-kilometre squared area, 22 mosques. So it's very different for me where I live in terms of our multiculturalism, which is much more about monocultures who live in ghettos and don't rub shoulders. It's a very different definition to the one that you might understand.
I actually want to discuss that, but before we do that, many of the tweets that you have posted have these hashtag Putin rocks, which I find very ironic, because here in Russia, you wouldn't be allowed by law to say or publish many things that you say about the Muslims in particular, because in this society we do prioritize social cohesion over freedom of speech, and that has been like that over many years, I would even argue centuries, and I think it only intensified under Putin. Do you still think he rocks?
Yeah, I think Putin rocks in many ways.
But he stands contrary to most of your ideas. I mean, he would be absolutely appalled by many of the things you say.
That's fine as well. I think you started out by saying, you know, do we live in a society where we can disagree but still sit in the same room? I don't mind if Putin thinks many of my ideas are morally abhorrent. That's absolutely his right to have his views. I hold my views very clearly and very dearly. For me, I come from a country where there is an Islamic takeover going on. I come from a country where my daughters, our daughters, are targeted by Islamic jihadists. And that's not, I'm not afraid to say any of the things I say. It's very important.
I mean, I understand your
So why
baggage,
does Putin rock to me? Because For too long, the West has painted him as a monster, and I don't think it's acceptable any longer. Should he be back in the G8? Absolutely. Does he need to have sanctions against him? No, I don't. I don't have a problem with Putin in the way that other people seem to, or maybe you have.
Well, I don't know if you follow Putin's statements, but just last week he spoke again about the need to relax immigration rules in Russia, and he specifically pointed out that, you know, people of all religious and ethnic backgrounds should be welcomed, especially if they have some connection to Russia or the so-called Russian world. So he seems to be far more bullish on immigration, particularly Muslim immigration, than Theresa May's government.
I don't know if you could be. I don't know if you could bend down on. You know, if you could sort of cow in submission to a religion more than we have. We have de facto Sharia law in the UK right now. We prevented a journalist from coming into our country on the basis of future hate speech, as yet unsaid. That is a bizarre situation to live in. So I think we have it much worse.
This country also has its very peculiar understanding of the freedom of speech. But you know, bringing you back to the Muslim immigration or any immigration for that matter, I think the difference is how our societies are handling it. And in this country, it would not be considered advisable to put people in high-density neighborhoods. They would be
agreed.
Not only required to integrate, but the state would actually facilitate that integration.
And on that, you and I completely agree. You know, I've seen multiple examples in the no-go zones that I visited across Europe where migrants are all packed away into the suburbs. It never works. It creates a situation where there's them and us. If you go to Sweden, if you go to Belgium, if you go to parts of London, there's parts of London, Sweden, Belgium, you can't walk anymore if you're a Western woman and you have your hair uncovered. You'll be spat at and called white trash. That's never going to work. And if you have a system here where you are able to integrate, of course that's going to work much better. But we don't have multiculturalism. It's what I was explaining to you. We have a system of monocultures living in ghettos. That's very different thing.